On today's podcast, me and my guest talked a lot about Jewish people, about Israel, about Rastafarianism, and about how this religion is connected to Christians, Israel, and King Salman. But before that, please subscribe to my channel because 95% of you are watching my podcast without even subscribe to this channel. So please do so. And now, let's go straight to the podcast.
Apollo, the original. Apollo, the original.
So Ross, let's get right into the religion stuff. You're a Jew, and you're a Judaist, right? That's how you call it.
No, so first people have their own sensitivities and their own understandings and their own definitions of these things.
Yeah.
Right? I can only answer for myself. Okay. It could just be where and how I grew up. Some people don't have a problem with, for example, even the term like referring themselves as a Jew versus like for myself, if I was to introduce myself and I would say, "Hey, Ross, I'm a Jew," I'd say, "I'm Ross, I'm Jewish."
Oh, there's a difference.
For me, I don't even understand, but there is a difference. There's a distinction that people make, and some people make a big deal. Some people don't care at all.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum, just like any sensitivity to even to spicy.
So me,
right?
so me calling you a Jew is an insult or not?
Not necessarily to me, but some people perhaps it would be because somehow I think it got associated with a more derogatory expression,
Gotcha.
or it was associated with a certain tone.
Yeah.
Listen, a lot of I think there's a book that came out regarding kind of like cultural or generational trauma. I mean, World War II fucked
Holocaust.
up a lot of things. So the Holocaust fucked up a lot of things for a lot of people. So there are a lot of people who have sometimes a heightened sensitivity even to, certain things, whether right, wrong, or whatever. I'm not, who am I to say?
So the nationality is called Jewish.
So this is actually very interesting, and I don't know that I've figured it out myself enough. But when for myself, and I know for others, Judaism is a religion.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily what I would call a nationality, because there's not, besides Israel, which makes people Israeli because there are Jewish people and non-Jewish people from Israel. To be Jewish is not necessarily nationality. It's actually one of the parts about Judaism that is kind of interesting is that, the concept of the wandering Jew, not wandering Jewish person, ironically. That concept, there's even a plant named the wandering Jew. It crawls all over the place. But, Jewish people kind of not having a homeland kept them from having kind of like a Jewish nationality, in my opinion. Now, there's also something that people refer to as Jewish identity.
Yeah.
Right? Being maybe culturally Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who, and for me, my background is Russian and Polish. I really don't know anything about Russian culture or Polish culture unless it was integrated in what I refer to as my Jewish culture. Now, with that being said also, just like any other group or any religion, there are lots of branches and separations. The big ones that I'm aware of for Jewish people, and when I refer to Jewish people, and we'll get into this with what I've learned about Rastafarianism and such, is that even the term Jewish people has different definitions for different people. When I refer to Jewish people, I'm speaking about the two different types, which is basically the Ashkenazi, which are more of the Eastern European Jewish people, and then the other branch, if you will, is the Sephardim, which is the plural for Sephardic people, which are more the Middle Eastern Jewish people. Though the religion might be identical, to varying degrees of concentration, just like tea or something. I mean, there's the orthodoxy of every religion, and then it gets more and more watered down and reformed. But ultimately, I would think that both groups of people share, for the most part, more similar concepts and ideologies about what Judaism is. But with that being said, culturally, there are differences. So, for example, of the ones that I'm aware of, there's a holiday that usually, for example, also the Jewish calendar is a different calendar than the one that we use here in the States. There's just a Jewish holiday, they call it a high holiday, or called Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. And I think that calendar is in the year 5,780 something.
So they don't count the calendar from the birth of Jesus.
It doesn't start then.
Yeah. So prior to starting this new YouTube channel, I have made around 500 podcasts and interviews in my home country. And I noticed one thing. If you want to make a good content, if you have to have a great interview or a podcast, you have to stay focused. Your mind has to be as sharp as possible. You have to listen to every single word that your guest is telling you. So that's why before every podcast, I have this thing called mindset. So this supplement is a nootropic, which means that it helps your mind to stay focused. For 1 or 2 hours, you will be as focused as possible for your daily routines. Whether you're working, whether you're writing something, whether you're editing videos, maybe shooting some photos, or doing interviews or podcasts, or just shooting some content. This thing is definitely made for you. So before my every podcast, I'm having this mindset. 20 to 30 minutes before we start filming, I'm having this one serving of mindset. Now, there are two versions of this supplement. The one with the caffeine, which has around 2 to 3 espresso shots in one serving, or you have this one, the one that I have in my hands, which is non-stimulant one. I don't like having my caffeine before a workout or before shooting a video, shooting podcast interviews, and etc. You definitely have to try this supplement called Mindset. And of course, I have a discount code for you. If you go to caged.com and use discount code APOLLO, APOLLO, you will get 15% off all of their products. Cage.com, discount code APOLLO. And now let's get back to the podcast.
Right, it doesn't start then. Whereas our calendar here does. Yeah. Right? That's why, it's only 2023.
Yeah.
But there are other cultures that go even past 5,000 years, but anyhow, so, there's, for example, a holiday that comes up based on the Jewish calendar. For us, it's around Easter time, maybe April, something like that. At least, and again, fact check what I say if you have any questions, but from my understanding, the famous Last Supper,
yes,
which is depicted in the painting, was in fact a Passover Seder. It was the meal that people have during the holiday of Passover, the Jewish holiday of Passover. And I believe that the word Passover means order, because that meal, there's an order in which you're supposed to kind of eat things.
Yes.
Okay. Intermixed with certain prayers and songs, and this is a celebratory holiday. There are other Jewish holidays, one just passed called Yom Kippur, which is one of the fasting holidays. It's the Day of Atonement, and that is not necessarily a celebratory holiday, but it's still a holiday nonetheless. More so a holy day, instead of something that you'd think would be a holiday that would be, celebrated with laughter and joy. But as far as my understanding also, there are, different levels of observance. Like I had mentioned, other religions, there's an orthodoxy level, and they're very serious, gung-ho about taking everything to the letter, right, and doing everything in the way that they believe to have been the way and that they think is right. And then, at least from my understanding of Judaism, below that, there's basically a conservative movement. And then below that, basically what they call a reform movement, which is kind of the least, I don't want to say like least observant, because they observe very strongly what they believe in, but it may be different traditions and different interpretations than the orthodoxy, which are, I think, have more of a strict interpretation of certain
So
things.
those people that live basically almost only in New York, the Jewish people, these are the Orthodox, right?
So people that
With this
most people have
hair.
seen, right, with the hair, they're called payas,
Yes.
like curly hair, and then the hat, and then some of them wear suits, some of them wear special, like the whole thing, like they have a whole special outfit.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind it that I don't understand. I've maybe it's been explained to me. It's not to look funny. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It is. It comes from respect, and it comes from tradition, and it comes from. I mean, you know, I've always looked at it and said, like, you know, at least the thing they wear every day is a suit and not sweatpants. You know, like you could pick any uniform. At least it's one that at least looks a little more presentable. You
Yeah,
know, if you're
and
gonna wear the same thing every day.
and as far as I know, the men that almost don't work in their communities, right? The women are working, and men are observing the world. They're reading the Torah. That's almost like everything that they do. And as far as I know, they got a lot of money from the community because the rich Orthodox pay a lot of money to the communities, and that's how they exist over there.
So I don't want to speak as the authority. That's not something I've heard. Okay, that the women work and the men study.
Okay.
It's from. I mean, one of the things that I know about the kind of the orthodoxy, or they call it like Hasidic, which is like
Yes.
a movement within Orthodox level observance. But you know, they're very much a tight knit community, and that in a lot of ways threatens people who don't understand it. I, for one, don't really much understand it either. And there's even, you know, there's even like a concept that I've heard of that, you know, um, you know, that somebody from that community might almost be, for lack of a term, disappointed in a non-observant Jew and more accepting of somebody. I mean, the term is a Gentile, somebody who's not Jewish. It's not derogatory or anything, to my understanding. But basically, they'd rather, they're almost more accepting of somebody who's not Jewish, than somebody who's like not fulfilling
Yes.
God's prophecy, like myself, that doesn't keep kosher, doesn't keep the Sabbath, does not do all of these other things. So, but anyway, you know, there is a lot in that community that stays within that community for good and bad and otherwise. There are things that I'm sure, you know, kind of like, you know, like I said, good, bad, and otherwise. Just like a lot of groups that want to keep certain things tight and information in, whether it's any sort of fraternity or whatever it is. Like, I think that, you know, there is like an incentive perhaps to like really know who your neighbors are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And a lot of it comes from the historical past of Jewish people. You know, it's almost like the joke, even amongst Jewish people, is like the holidays are like, they tried to kill us, we survived. They tried to kill us, we survived. And that's like every holiday from like day one of the Jewish holiday. I think 80% of the holidays are, they tried to kill us, we survived. You know, and for that reason, Jewish people typically, you know, they're almost like famous for their survival skills. For that reason, it's not just the Holocaust that people survive, and it's Jewish people have been
thousands of
tested
years.
historically. So, you know, in these communities, and there are resources out there, and there are things that, you know, people have been discussing and educating and teaching people like you, like me, like everybody about this stuff, just like, in this technological age, other groups are able to kind of educate a larger audience, But what I think is and has been dangerous for a lot of people is when people are, and I don't say this in terms of like calling somebody stupid, but when people are ignorant about how any person or group does something and they then kind of fill in the blank of why they think they're doing it or what they think they're doing, there are a lot of misunderstandings and misinterpretations. You know, I've heard, people think so many bad and wrong things are happening in this community because it's kind of mysterious. Because unless you're in it, you don't really know what happens, which is kind of the case for also other communities. It happened in my high school. It happened, like people get cliquey in their groups.
So if you want to learn, you have to learn from the people that are in that community.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, the books are all out there. You know what I mean? Like the Jewish people are also like famous for having an amazing written tradition. These books are not secret books. These books, you don't have to, you get them on Amazon. It's the same books that they're using. So it's not like there's, in my opinion, and the books that they have. So, for example, there's like, from my understanding, and this will come up again when we go into the overlap, if you will, or where other religions meet this. But, there's the Old Testament, which is what Jewish people believe in. And then there's the New Testament and the Old Testament, which in my belief, in my understanding, Christian people, which is a huge group and of course diced up into many other smaller groups, that's what they believe in. They believe the Old Testament and the New Testament. So, I'm sure it's the case in all religions, but it's not that people, when, even with the comment you said that, the men study, it's like, what do they study? Are they just the same book? They're studying like the book, but also interpretations of the book by other like high level educated rabbis. And rabbi just means teacher. It's not a mystical thing. I mean, anyone kind of with a beard kind of looks like a teacher in that community. All teachers, I think. Jesus was a rabbi, because he was a teacher.
Yeah. But why do the Judaïsts do not kind of recognize the New Testament? Because they only follow the Old Testament, which is called Torah, right?
Torah, right?
And that's it. The Old Testament ends, and they say that's it. We're good. No other book needed.
So it's a good question, and I'll share with you what I know about it. From my understanding, to overly simplify it, okay, Jewish people believe, let's say, that the Messiah is coming.
Yes.
Christian people believe that the Messiah was Jesus, but Jewish people were like, he's a good guy. He's a great guy. He's, miracles. Yeah, sure. Cool. Yeah. But doesn't pass the test yet for us. High standards. Okay. High standards. That's the way I kind of, that's the way I kind of have come to understand it. That Jewish people are still waiting for the Messiah and they believe that the Messiah has not come yet. Christian people are like, no, this guy's it. I know for a fact this guy's it. Jewish people are like, nah, I don't know, maybe not, So that's my understanding. And it's not that, I believe that if you speak with anybody who kind of understands, who's educated, it's not about, it's not about anything negative about Jesus or anything he did or what he represents or how people, want to believe, but it's just that Jewish people have maybe chosen not to or don't yet believe or just don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah.
So Jewish people do not believe in the Holy Trinity because they don't
Correct.
believe that Jesus was the Son of God. But in the meantime, the Holy Trinity is very it's a very difficult thing to understand because that's the Father, the Son, and
And
the
the
Holy
Holy
Spirit.
Spirit, sure.
Yeah. So the Jesus is the Son of God, but he is also a God. So that's one of the things that Christians and Muslims don't get together, because they say, yeah, Jesus was a prophet, but he was not the God, and he was not the Son of God. So that's kind of almost the only thing that they don't get along with. They say that's it, and Christians say that the Muhammad is not the prophet, and the Muslims say the Muhammad is the prophet and he is the last one, which
Right.
which they have to follow.
Right, right. So, you know, it could be, you know, but so right. They're similar but different, right? It's just that, you know, it's recognized, but that, you know, Christianity doesn't go that far with Muhammad.
Yes.
You know, Judaism, for example, recognize, you know, it's not, I mean, when I say recognize, I mean, of course, you know the other religions are out there and you know that, you know what I mean? So recognize, appreciate, what have you. And then, just don't go that far with it, you know? The thing that just came up for me right now, which is kind of interesting, I think, which I don't know, some of the people listening and watching might find to be somewhat different, is that in my experience and in what I've learned, you know, like uh, Jewish people tend to not what they call proselytize. The Jewish people are not trying to get people to join Judaism.
Yes.
Okay? It's a very big line in the sand. Okay? There's never a Jewish person knocking door to door saying, here's the Torah. You really, you know, your life would get much better if you read it. Not saying there's anything wrong with that, you know, but that's not a thing that people of the Jewish religion do. And in a lot of ways, their Jewish people are very strict about who they consider Jewish. And this will come up again with Rastafarian stuff. But, you know, traditionally, you know, from my understanding, you know, Judaism follows the maternal bloodline. So the mother has to be Jewish.
Yes.
Okay? Interestingly, in Islam, I believe, it follows the paternal bloodline.
Christianity as well.
Okay. So, you know, so there's a difference. And then I think the only other way to kind of become Jewish then would be conversion, you know, and I believe it's, you know, it's not very easy. It's not, you know, from my understanding, there are almost like easier religions to get into. You know, like other ones are more welcoming. Hey, yeah, you want to be in this club? You want to join us? Sure.
Yeah, because for the Christians, you have to say that Jesus is my God, Jesus is King, and to be baptized, right? If you want to become a Muslim, you have to say that there is only one God and Muhammad is his last prophet, and that's it. But if you want to become a Judaist, you have to study Torah for, I believe, for some time. Then you have to have an exam, something like that, right?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't exactly know the process. I mean, I married somebody who was not Jewish, and conversion was never on the table for me. It was not, but most often when I hear of people converting nowadays or growing up, it was because they were converting for marriage and because it was important for both people to kind of be on the same page when they wanted to start a family, and they converted. And then there are other times where Jewish people convert, you know, to, you know, kind of match whatever their partner's into. But not so often do I hear of kind of like an adult wandering into Judaism and converting. It's not, to me, as common.
Yeah.
But I know people that have definitely converted to Christianity from Judaism, you know.
Or from atheism.
Well, yeah, for atheism. I mean, you know, a lot of that stuff that I think, you know, at least for me, if it's all similar to anybody else, a lot of things are somewhat fluid, or at least can be, and people, you know, the faith that people have can be fluid. You know, at trying times, it's not hard to say, where's God now? Or, don't I have credit from all this prayer? Like I need to, I need to take a withdrawal from the prayer bank now, because I'm struggling, but, I think for a lot of people, those concepts are fluid. Um, but, and that's where I think faith comes in, and people have to keep the faith,
Do you consider yourself faithful or religious?
Good question. So I would say faithful, definitely the term I use is spiritual. Okay. Kind of a big umbrella. But, my life experience has taught me from many different religions, from many, I draw from tools that I've learned from many different people, from, one of the, I listened to a panel once in college at the community college I went to. A wonderful teacher there, professor there, and he set up kind of like a panel, and he had like a rabbi, a priest, an imam, and
Amazing.
it was amazing. And we got to ask questions. Sometimes they would all answer. Sometimes one would say, "I got this one," And it was something that the priest said that I actually remember of all the things that was said that day, and I really love this. And he said that all the religions are like pipes coming off of the same pool, and that pool is love. And whether it goes in this direction, it's like everyone has a faucet that we take from it. I thought that was really beautiful, and I've kind of utilized and absorbed that concept, and it's come up in different areas of my life. Like for example, there was a time when I was younger, when I was very much into what they refer to as like the internal arts, kind of like Tai Chi, Qigong, different types of meditation, different types of energy healing, yoga, that sort of stuff. And I started reading books that were somewhat kind of spiritual, metaphysical, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, things like that. And one book was called the Dancing Wooly Masters by Gary Zukov, and he wrote some other really kind of famous books. I think like something about the soul, like the heart of the soul or something. Anyway, interesting book. And this was on kind of like quantum mechanics. And I think it was written in the 70s. It was a really cool book. And there was a line in it that I might be butchering, but the concept I think will be more understandable, which is that there are people who follow science and there are people who follow religion, but they are both just dances, and the true love of both types of people is dancing. And I always liked that. And to me, it was very similar to what I learned from what the priest said. And it's that faith, that spirituality. It's almost like, I get along people that, let's say I get along really well with people that love music. It almost doesn't matter what kind of music they like, but they have that same passion that I do for music, or like people that are into sports, like, yeah, people bicker about one team being better than the other, but it's that passion that both people share that at the end of the day, you're meeting each other with that energy level and that interest about the same topic, call it Coke, Pepsi, this team or that team. So I found that to be really interesting. But my understanding and relationship with Judaism has changed. I mean, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors on my father's side. I grew up, both grandfathers passed away when I was pretty young, but my grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor, spoke with me a lot, and I listened a lot. And she experienced and survived, I don't want to say some of the worst, but like the worst of kind of humanity. I mean,
Yes.
the stories that she has are, I don't even want to repeat. Like it's terrible. That people could do this, and my grandmother always loved the fact that she was Jewish and loved being Jewish and paid the ultimate price just for being Jewish. As did our family. But in terms of being observant traditionally, in terms of going to, the term for almost like the equivalent to church for Jewish people would be like a synagogue.
Yeah.
Okay, so she didn't find that as important. Okay, she didn't go to synagogue, for every Sabbath, for example. And the Jewish Sabbath is the Jewish holidays start at sundown, so Jewish Sabbath starts Friday night and it goes to Saturday night. Okay,
That's 24 hours when you
24
can,
hours.
when you can do almost anything, right?
Or in the alternative, you're not supposed to do anything.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do what's considered work.
Yes.
Just like anything, people take it to the extreme. Who's to say what's right or wrong, But there are some people who believe that even pushing the button in an elevator is work.
I've heard that.
So but for example, riding the elevator is less work than taking the stairs.
Yeah.
So some buildings have what they call a Shabbat or Sabbath elevator that automatically stops at every floor. You don't have to push a button. Okay? And this is the way that people have accommodated that tradition,
Imagine that in a skyscraper.
Well, I'm sure to some degree. Yeah, no, especially in New York City, there are 100 stories. I mean, so I'm sure that affects where they live, though. So they wouldn't just move anywhere if they didn't have it, But yeah, so the way that I had kind of learned from my grandmother, and both of them really, was that kind of like you don't have to be anywhere particular to pray to God.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be in a synagogue. You don't have to be in a church. If my grandma's cooking dinner in the kitchen and she wants to talk to God, God's there. So that's how I was raised, right? But I also know that in Judaism, there is something called a minyan, which is a group of 10 men. And from my understanding, it's almost like if you have one person praying or 9 people praying, it's all just kind of like this primary level of prayer. But it's like the second you get a group of 10 men, it amplifies the prayer.
I got you.
Okay, that's my understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are some things that almost traditionally can't happen if there is no minyan. So it's the word is mitzvah, which means like a good deed. There are a couple of concepts in Judaism that I think are really wonderful, and just like other religions, I take from them too that are really wonderful. But the idea of a mitzvah is a good selfless act, right? And in the Torah, there is a certain number of them. There could be like 600 or something that people are supposed to continuously do. And it's a blessing to do it, okay? And it's helping others, it's giving to charity, it can be any number of things. And there's also a concept called tikkun olam, which means to heal the world. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say the Jewish world. It doesn't say the non-Jewish world. It says heal the world. We're all here, right? So, again, from my understanding in Judaism, there's no concept that the world would be better if everyone was Jewish. That, to me, I've never learned.
So, in regards to your grandmother, right? Mm-hmm. So, I believe the kind of the biggest question to God from Jewish people is why did He let Holocaust happen? Right?
100%.
If this is your nation, if these are your people, mm-hmm. how could you do that?
100%.
And I believe I have no answer to that. Though I can call myself a Christian, mm-hmm. though I have found religion just recently, maybe half a year ago, something like that. Yeah, because of all the madness that is happening in the world, I understood that I have to be with some kind of a group of people, mm-hmm. and I'm totally fine with atheists, mm-hmm. etc. But I'm more of a Christian. I'm totally fine with Muslims, mm-hmm. because I know personally some Muslims, mm-hmm. and they're great people.
You got the beard for it.
Excuse me?
You got the beard for it.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I believe, the main question from Jewish people to the God. Why did He let this happen? I want to touch on, if you mentioned mitzvah, mm-hmm. there are a few, I believe, mitzvahs, right? In Judaism.
I think there's for some reason, the number 613 pops into my head.
Yeah, what I mean is, for instance, there's a bar mitzvah.
So
There is
mitzvah
a-
means good.
Yes.
Okay. Bar mitzvah is like and I had one at 13 years old as a boy. I became a man in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't mean to cut you off though. So I don't
No,
know
no,
if you,
no.
oh, okay. So basically, because the Jewish calendar works on the lunar calendar, when a Jewish person is born, they are born during a certain excuse me, time of year in the Jewish calendar that relates to a certain passage in the Torah, because from my understanding, the Torah aligns with the calendar. So this is my understanding, every week of a particular month, like the first week of a particular month, the same passage of the Torah is read. Okay? So when somebody who's Jewish is born, no matter where they're living, even though it's here and the dates don't exactly match up, you almost get assigned a certain Torah portion. From my experience and memory, the big part about the bar mitzvah is actually reading your Torah portion, the one that you were born under, okay, to the congregation. And then usually there's some tradition of a project involved where you take the lessons from that, because each portion is filled with lessons and proverbs, I mean, all these learning opportunities, right? Biblical stories from the Old Testament. So you take that and you find a way to bring it into your life, current life. You might have a different project where you're doing one thing or another, and that's part of the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah for females, because Hebrew is a language that has a masculine and a feminine, I believe. And basically, so that was the bar mitzvah. And it happens at 13, where I read some prayers. There are also songs and various
And
things.
it's always happens at the age of 13?
Nope. So traditionally, and if you're kind of raising your children Jewish, it happens at 13. But people who never had a bar mitzvah, who are Jewish, can always have a bar mitzvah. I have an uncle who had one in adulthood because he was Jewish, but he never had one as a kid.
I got you.
So people can have it. I mean, and for various reasons, And then, of course, for kids, there's usually, at least in my tradition, is probably similar in all the levels of observance to some degree. But, the Orthodoxy keep men and women very separate, kind of like Islam.
Yes.
Okay? To an extreme almost, And the bar mitzvah is usually followed with like a big party, So for me, it was inviting all the kids from my school, and depending upon where children live, Jewish and non-Jewish people go to a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs around the age of 12 and 13, And mine was packed with Jewish kids, not Jewish kids, friends, family. It was like a whole big party, And Mexican people, I think, have a quinceañera. Maybe Christian people have a communion.
Yes.
It's maybe somewhat similar to a degree,
What is interesting is that Jewish people have a very strange tradition to my mind, which is, I believe it's made when a boy is born and he is very, very small. And how do you call it in English, that they do something?
Circumcision.
Yeah, with his penis, right?
Yeah.
Why do they do this, and at what age?
So
And all the Jewish do
question.
that, or only the Orthodox?
Good question. So nowadays, there are people who are Jewish who don't do it, and there are people who are not Jewish who do it, right? And in Europe, it's not a very popular thing regardless. In America, it became the norm for Jewish and non-Jewish people.
Even for non-Jewish?
Oh yeah. Okay. Now, also, I believe that in Islam, it's they circumcise as well, the men in Islam. Okay. But a lot of the traditional, Chris Rock, the comedian, has a kind of good bit about food and dietary laws, and even to refer to whether it's halal or kosher or whatever. But basically, his explanation was that it comes from a time where food could kill you very easily, you know? So, you know, in his line, he says, you know, a pork chop could kill you. You know, you get trichinosis. So they said, oh no, after enough people died, they said, no more pork, you know?
Also, don't eat meat with the milk.
So there are different rules about that. You know, some of them are about cleanliness. Some of them are about an animal being considered more or less dirty.
Yeah.
Okay. From my understanding, the mixing meat and milk and not being kosher. The idea that I remember is that something like you don't cook the baby in the mother's milk, as if like universally that's like doesn't sit right. You know, like it's like
Oh, you mean in the stomach if you eat meat and milk?
if you know like you eat meat and milk, you're kind of mixing the milk, which is the baby's sustenance, with like the flesh of there's something about that not kosher.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, again, not everyone keeps kosher. A lot of people who are not Jewish in my life that have asked me questions that have a certain the idea of what Judaism is. A lot of them think that a lot of Jewish people that it's very black and white, all or none. Like people are like, oh, you're Jewish, that means you can't eat a cheeseburger, right? And I'm like, no, but then you're not Jewish. By some people's definition, I'm not then, you know? But Judaism, in my learning, because I married somebody who wasn't Jewish, in my learning, as much as it is a very old religion, there are parts of it that are very evolved, okay, and are very much kind of like accepting of things that are happening in current times. So there are, for example, more, you know, than ever, let's say, female rabbis, okay, where traditionally it was just men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you see the same thing in Islam. And I don't know that you see a female priest in Christianity. There might be another term for somebody who has a similar role, but they wouldn't call it a female, maybe a priestess. Maybe there is something.
No. Pastor, yeah, in Protestant church.
Okay, so I mean, maybe there's something similar, but in Judaism, female rabbis. You know, there are many different kind of areas of Judaism that are very accepting of a lot of people and a lot of differences. And you know, there was a girl I had a crush on in college. Her name I won't mention, but she said she was more observant than I was. She like kept kosher, and I didn't understand it, you know. And she said that in Judaism, when you start to question God, is when your relationship with God begins. Okay, and I was like, whoa, it was very interesting to hear that. It wasn't so much that you either follow everything to the T and just have blind faith. Mm-hmm. That's not what she was saying. She's saying you're allowed to question it. You're allowed to say, why does this make sense? Why the Holocaust? Why this? You know, almost like it's okay to say, prove to me, God, that you're real, because this doesn't add up. Why would you, you know, at least in my experience. And that's, you know, kind of the way I learned about it. So, you know, it's a bit different in that way, but it's not that Jewish people are only one way. And when people kind of stop and think about it, it's really similar with everyone. It's just maybe not as accepted, but, you know, somewhere right now in a very strict Muslim country, there might be some kid there with a FM or transistor radio listening to American music or something. I mean, like, you know, questioning and challenging whatever those rules are, you know.
Let's get back to the question that I was asking you. So why do
the circumcision?
Yeah, why
circumcision. I'm sorry. So, from my understanding, it was believed to be more clean. Okay, and that's why I was actually referring to the food, because I think if that was the only reason, I believe science has proven that as long as the male keeps his genitalia clean, but is not circumcised, then it's not an issue. It's when that person does not keep it clean that I guess infection could build up inside of the skin area.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one. That was one thing. And then that was one reason. And then also, I remember that like circumcision is one of like, I think it was like Abraham or something. It might be like one of the first covenants with God that like every Jewish male needs to be circumcised But there are a lot of people who have made this a very heated topic, and especially grown men that say, "I want my foreskin back."
Yeah. Nobody asked me.
Because nobody asked me, and there are people who say that it has increased pleasure because it has more nerve endings and it has all these other things going on that people that are circumcised are missing out on without, like you said, without any choice in the matter. So, so there's that. Now, like I said, I don't think the reason is really for health as long as people are keeping it clean. But, it might just be more traditional. It's definitely not to hurt the kid. That's definitely not what it's for. It's more so, I think because of the tradition of the covenant. But again, I don't know enough to speak on the exact reasons. All these things have been debated and figured out.
So Ross, before that, you've mentioned that you were married to a Muslim woman.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? Because as far as I know, if a man is a Muslim, he can marry a Christian or a Judaist woman. No problem, she doesn't have to convert. But it's vice versa. If the woman is a Muslim and she marries a non-Muslim, so the man has to convert. But you didn't.
Correct.
Tell me about your marriage from the religious standpoint.
Sure. So, I think that because I did some research on it, I think the term that they use in Islam is kind of like of the book, which is not the Torah. Of the book means the Quran. Okay. I kind of, let's say, practice in my personal kind of religion, and if you will, is a concept of one love. And there's a Bob Marley song about it. It's a concept. It's an idea, and it's basically that I made a heart-centered decision, and I thought about it, and her and I discussed it, and it was trying for many different reasons. A lot of things needed to be discussed that probably wouldn't have needed to be discussed so quickly if we were maybe of the same religion. But I'll share this. So my ex, I'm not currently married, my ex, who's also the mother of my children, so it wasn't just I dated somebody who wasn't Jewish, but I had children with her, and I have 2 children, and they're half Jewish and half Muslim. So in addition to just being Muslim, my ex's family is Persian or Iranian, okay, which is a very strong culture.
Yes.
And the Iranian people or Persian people have a very strong culture, regardless of if they're Muslim, regardless if they're Jewish or Christian. It's a very strong culture, okay? So the Persian culture, to me, at least maybe I'm just speaking about her as an individual or her family culture, but
Sorry to interrupt, that she was born here? Or
she was actually born in Iran, came here when she was 4. A lot of people came in the early 80s when the Islamic regime took over and everything, they got out. And her story to get here was challenging. It was all of challenge, which, again, refer to Chris Rock, by his definition means that, she's a true American. He made a comment that said, if you serve this country or if you struggled to get here, you are by definition what America is all about. He said, just because you were born here, he said it in a more vulgar way. You just because you came out of, just because you're born here on this land does not give you the right to point your finger at somebody else who's also here but had to struggle to get here.
Yeah.
So, point well taken. So she struggled to get here, as did her family. They are the type of people in fabric that makes this country great. Um, but their Persian Iranian culture was very strong, and to me, much stronger than their Muslim culture. So I didn't consider them to be overly religious, and quite frankly, if they were, we never would have been able to get married because the family would have stopped it.
Oh,
Right?
really?
Yeah.
I believe they would just force you to convert. That's it. Would you do it?
I would not have converted, just as I would not have asked anyone else to convert. Um, and for me, because Judaism, again, back to what we started off talking about, it's not just a religion. It's not like, I like the Miami Dolphins, but I marry, but I marry somebody and the whole family likes the Raiders, and I say, okay, fine, Raiders
From
are my
now
team
on,
now.
yeah.
It's a lot different. For me, my Judaism's wrapped up in my identity. Again, not nationality, I'm American, but my identity in terms of who I relate to, the kind of like the perspective I have on certain things, the sensitivity I have to certain cultural generational trauma. If I, it's almost like I almost have to always have these antenna up for anti-Semitism to make sure that I'm safe. It's a weird feeling that other people don't have. Your average white person in America does not have that. Does not have to have this sensitivity
Notion.
to it,
Yeah.
right? When I was younger, it was more of a fear. Now it's not a fear, but it's a sensitivity still. I want to know what it's all about, and I'm happy to address it. I'm happy to educate people, happy to prove people wrong. But still sensitive to it.
Yeah, but how would people say that you're a Jewish? Because your name is not Jewish. It's common in American name, and your last name is not Jewish as well, because you had it from your father, not from your mother, right?
Well, both of my parents are Jewish.
Okay. Both of
Okay,
them.
both are Jewish, and both of their parents are Jewish. I did something that was very non-traditional by marrying a non-Jewish person. But so after World War II, when my grandparents, when my father's parents were Holocaust survivors, okay, when they came through Ellis Island, okay, where all the immigrants were coming through, a lot of people changed their last names, a lot of Jewish people, to become more Americanized, okay? So my last name is Milestone, which means like a great accomplishment,
Yes.
or it also means, literally a stone that is set on the road every mile,
Yeah.
right? A form of measurement. But it was probably more like Milstein or something
gotcha.
like that.
Yes.
Definitely something more Jewish, and then Ellis Island, and my grandparents were like, hey, we're in America now. Let's shake this Jewish thing, not identity, but listen, they just went through the Holocaust. They were pretty freaked out.
Yeah.
So that's how my last name became Milestone. But some people know right off the bat that I'm Jewish. I meet some people, and whether it's the way I look, the way I act, I don't know. Sometimes I'm surprised. Sometimes I'm like, I guess, I'm getting older and I'm looking more Jewish. Like there's a joke in a movie about that. Eugene Levy, that actor, made a joke about, like I think it was him, but as like men get older, they just look more and more Jewish. So maybe it's that, or I mean, Jewish men, they look more Jewish, but.
That guy has amazing eyebrows.
Yeah, very, very famous
Man.
for his eyebrows, right? Yeah, he does have good eyebrows. But anyhow, so so some people can tell. But the interesting thing when I speak with people is that when I really speak with them and I really talk, like we're talking on kind of a more serious level about kind of behind the curtain real life stuff, I mention to them that my experience, actually also when I speak with Black people, African American, however you want to call it, is that some people, they might look at me like I'm just some white guy, and to them I might be, but I don't feel like that, because I feel like, no, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. Like my life experience might be more similar to somebody who has had a Black experience in America than somebody who's just had a white experience in America. Now, granted, I still have more of a white experience than a black experience, but I think I'm closer to understanding than somebody who has not felt the type of oppression and hatred and all these things that
just because of his skin color,
right.
or the way he looks.
So yeah, you know, so some people can tell, some people can't. But yeah, but when I met my ex, you know, we had gotten along so well that the the details, if you will, of what you call this or what you call that became less important. What was more important was how congruent we felt, like puzzle pieces fitting, you know. And that honeymoon phase lasted quite some time. And, you know, it lasted long enough and developed long enough that when it became time to decide if we were going to take the next step to continue our relationship or say bye-bye, it was kind of like there was only one choice. For me, at least, I didn't want to, you know, jokingly, even when we'd argue, say, well, you know, why did you ask me to marry? I said, well, I wanted to get to know you better, you know, because that was the only way I could. Because, for example, she was in California, I was in Miami. So the only way to continue dating was almost like to get engaged, because maybe it was because of her age, maybe because of her family or culture. They didn't want to keep sending their daughter to visit some guy for every other month or whatever, you know, like things. It was one of those situations. And I actually asked her parents, her father first and then her mother, for their blessing, and I didn't get it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge fucking day, man.
What did they
It
tell
was a
you?
huge day. They said no. They said, well, first her
Over my dead body.
father doesn't. So we were. I was visiting at the time because she was in LA. We were doing a long distance relationship, and her mom was throwing some sort of like party where all of my ex's girlfriends were going to be there. And I thought, you know what? This is a great time to get engaged, because then she could share it with her family. She could share it with her friends. I was okay that my people would just get a phone call or whatever, but you know, I thought it would be exciting for her, and then we don't have to tell the story 50 times. You know, like everyone was already there. So I thought it was a great idea. So they're having the party. I had the ring in my pocket. It was like burning a hole everywhere I went. I was like, hey, look at this. You know, I'm going to do it. And
How old were you back then?
it was maybe like 2000. I was 35.
Not a youngster anymore, right?
No,
You've
no,
seen
no.
some stuff in
Right?
life,
Yeah,
yeah.
no. I mean, I didn't get married and have kids in my early 20s, like previous generations, my own parents, or even some of my friends. But I definitely did not rush into that. And my parents were divorced, and I wanted to take my time with it, which I'll bring up momentarily because it affected my decision. But I asked the father. I asked him to come outside. He didn't really understand because he didn't speak English so well. He said, "Hold on, let me get my wife." Her mom came out. I said, "Hey, this, that, and the other. You know, I want to ask her to marry me."
And the
And
whole people were watching.
well, no, they weren't watching that. We were still outside still,
Okay.
luckily. But I said, "Hey, you know, I'd like to ask your daughter to marry me." She says, "I think you should wait." She goes, "You know, like I think it's too soon or something. Like I think you should wait." It's like, okay. And I told her that, okay, I'll think about it. And I gave her my word, and I try to sleep on big decisions. So that night I was still visiting, so I was with her, and I slept on it. And I think she kind of knew what was going on. I had that feeling. Um, and then the next day I said, fuck it.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, this is what I want. You know, I love her. You know, this is it. So I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. But I also let her know that I didn't exactly have the blessing, but I had asked for it. So, you know, maybe she was being a little rebellious too. I don't know. But it's not like we had their blessing. Okay? In terms of what it's like, you know, intermarriage, if you will. At the time, I described it to people as actually being somewhat of a benefit because it forced us to discuss things that otherwise we would have had to wait until it came up to discuss. Like, how are we going to raise our kids? What are going to the traditions that we're bringing to the table? People don't usually discuss that around engagement time. People discuss that, if they do, when they have the kids, and often it becomes a fight. You know, not saying that it hasn't, but, you know, knowing consciously that we were coming from two different places and having the love and respect for the places that we were both coming from allowed us and provided us with the opportunity to speak about these details in ways that I know other people don't. What I was saying, well, now to kind of circle back to what I was saying about my own parents' divorce, you know, not too long ago, I had to defend my decision for marrying somebody who was not my religion, if you will, and for her marrying somebody who was not hers, and the person said, you know, something like, you know, and that's why people should, you know, stay with their own, something like that. And I was like, all right, well, listen, my parents, both Jewish, both of their parents Jewish, they're both the same, let's say, level of attractiveness. They both have a similar family background and culture. They're both from the same part of the world, this Eastern European Jewish, Ashkenazi Jewish, right? They both wanted the same things out of life. They both, let's say, were educated. And they got divorced.
Yeah.
Had a shit divorce. and my sister and I kind of got dragged through a part of it, you know? So religion is not the only deciding factor on whether or not there's going to be success. So I couldn't just go by that, you know? I instead went by how I felt, how we talked. And, you know, to me, there was always respect from her family, my family. There's always, you know, interest and respect. You know, one of my hobbies has been kind of like making jewelry by hand, or making, in Buddhism, they're called mala beads. They're prayer beads. Well, my ex's grandmother is a very observant Muslim woman. Wears a hijab all the time. There are rules about it once I was married to her, but prays the 5 times a day. Very religious. Does Ramadan still. I mean, she's, you know, like an older woman now, you know. And I remember I made her like there's like a version in Islam that's like a beaded, almost like a rosary, right? But there's one in Islam, and I think maybe it has like 13 beads. In Buddhism, they have like 108, whatever. And I made one for her, and she was like, so, I could tell she really appreciated it. She's like, how lucky am I that my like Jewish grandson-in-law made me this? You know, like, there was that kind of love there, you know, that kind of respect. So just being different religions was not the biggest challenge, and in a lot of the traditions that in her family culture were similar to the traditions in my family culture, which are probably similar traditions in, like, for example, an Italian or Russian family culture, which is that nobody leaves hungry, you know.
You take care of over your kids.
Yeah,
Family is the value.
yeah, exactly. Education's important. I mean, Jewish people, in my experience, are almost famous for really supporting, even pushing education.
Yes.
Pushing.
And supporting other Jewish people. For instance, if you go to from the US to, for instance, in Italy, and you have some problems, financial, other problems, you have to just find other Jewish people, and they will kind of definitely help you, right?
There is a camaraderie.
Yes.
Okay, but in my experience, if, like I said, this tikkun olam, I don't think a Jewish person would turn down a non-Jewish person who was in need. That is not the way I was raised. So if somebody lost their luggage and showed up at a synagogue, or doesn't have food and showed up at a synagogue, nobody's checking to see if they're Jewish to feed them.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, that's not the way it goes. But, you know, there's something I learned in college when I was actually researching the crossover between Rastafarianism and Judaism, and I don't know how accurate it is, so it's just a concept. But this person told me that almost like the Jewish dollar, is what he called it, passes through, I don't know, let's say 6 Jewish hands before it hits the world market, meaning that a Jewish people will support a Jewish-owned store.
Yes.
Okay, rather than going to a non-Jewish owned
Yes.
store, they want to support. Okay, but this person said, for example, when he was explaining it to me, he was saying that like the black dollar goes directly into the world. There almost was not that same type of. Nowadays, I'm so happy to see it. I follow all these things on Instagram, black-owned businesses, people supporting each other. I'm like, yes, this is what I know Jewish people have been doing. Check this out. There's something called Birthright Israel. Okay? Birthright Israel is it's a lot of money that has been donated to basically like a fund, okay, that basically like finances young people to do a free 10-day trip to Israel. Okay? Now, there are different, perhaps, reasons why this exists. There are, I'm sure, conspiracies on what exists regarding Zionism and people who are anti-Zionist and all this other stuff. Okay? But to me, regardless of what the purpose is, and regardless of what the takeaway from the trip is, I don't really know any other population of people that offers this, no matter what the reason is. It could be people that want to, train snipers. It's not free. You have to get yourself there or whatever. You know what I mean? To touch on your concept or your comment, and I think your comment also comes from. And I'm glad you brought this stuff up because I know in my life experience of the stereotype behind Jewish people and money and all of the stereotypes. Okay? And they're out there. The Rothschilds, I've done a lot of research. Okay? But, at the end of the day, it's like a free 10-day trip and you get to explore that part of the world and hopefully people get to think for themselves. It's not accept this or die. It's not live life this way or die. Judaism is very different in that there's no, you might not go to heaven, but you're not going to hell. Jewish people I don't think they even believe in hell.
You see, I'm an immigrant as well, so there are a few rules, if you can say so. Mm-hmm. When you go out of your country and you immigrate to another country, so I'm from Lithuania, that's a former USSR country, right? Mm-hmm. So I speak Lithuanian, I speak Russian, mm-hmm. because in Lithuanian back in 1990s, 80s, 70s, a lot of people spoke Russian, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of a mixed. So mm-hmm. my culture is like 50% Lithuanian, 50% mm-hmm. Russian, though I've never been to Russia. I have mm-hmm. almost no roots from Russia. Oh, wow. All right. But I know the culture and I speak Russian. So this goes the same for Lithuanians, and right. this goes the same for Russians. Right. Once you immigrate to another country, mm-hmm. stay away from your peers. Stay away from Lithuanians or from Russians. Wow. Because they are the first ones who is going to screw you. Wow. Yes. And wow. Guess what? What? So the first month we got here, guess who fucked up us? Lithuanians? No, the Russians. Oh, really? Yeah. Wow, wow. The first ones. Wow. These were the only ones who wanted and do that. Yeah, and they say that the same thing about Lithuanians. When you immigrate, you stay away from this community. Wow. Yeah. So maybe it's like they call it like a crabs in a barrel mentality, and everyone's clawing on everyone else to get higher, And there's even more than that. So the people that stayed in Lithuania kind of hate the ones who immigrated. Oh, wow. Why did you do that? Wow. you were poor here, you're going for a better life over there.
Right.
You're not a patriot.
Wow,
You're a
wow,
coward. Something like this.
wow,
Yeah, there's a
wow,
lot of hate.
wow. Like you gave up.
Yeah, what the fuck would you go
Wow,
to the UK, the US, the
wow.
Ireland, Switzerland,
Right.
Sweden, Norway, and such?
Wow, that's
Yes.
interesting.
And we're always kind of looking at the Jewish community, and we're like always like, wow, if there is a business, a Jewish guy will always go to that business owned by Jews because he wants to pay their dollars right there, right? Just like you said, 6 times the dollar goes through Jewish guys before it goes worldwide,
Right.
because you support each other.
There is that concept, you know. Now,
And you tend to live in the neighborhoods even, right?
so you know, yeah. I mean, the very observant Orthodox Jewish people. One of the things about the Sabbath or Shabbat is that you're not supposed to work, which also means you're not supposed to drive a car. So the people who are very observant, they actually live in walking distance to the synagogue, so they can go there all the time. So that's definitely a Jewish neighborhood. In terms of where I moved around a lot. Some places had more kind of Jewish people or Jewish kids, and some places had less, you know, and I got to experience kind of both, being one of the only kids in the school and feeling different, or being amongst a couple other people and, you know, still probably feeling different, but different, you know, in a different way. But, you know, for me now, I mean, looking back and now having 2 young children of my own, you know, a lot of ways in that I was raised, I do want to instill in my children, because even though I understand the concept of kind of like helping a Jewish business, the transferable concept is you want to help a family-owned business, you know, and like, you know, so nowadays I don't really care where anyone's from. I mean, somebody just recommended, I was going to meet somebody for dinner. One of the options was a family-owned Mexican restaurant. I said, done. I didn't even care what the food was, just family-owned. You know, you have, you know, the whole family working there and everything. I wanted to support that.
Yeah.
But you know, you know, but that is a thing. But it again, these are not rules, and you know, I really wanted to, you know, the people who are kind of, there is a distinction. I mean, from my understanding, though it's limited, you know, the I don't know that I've never been scared into being observant. That if I don't do that, I won't be blessed. If I don't do that, harm will come my way. If I don't do that, I won't go to heaven. Or I haven't really experienced that. Now, that might be the way it is. I just haven't felt it. But in my teachings and learnings, I've learned that there are at least some groups of Christian people who are very much black and white, saying that, you know, you have to, go to confession, and that people are almost like, I don't know, like almost like born with sin or something that needs to be cleaned of them before they can attain a certain level of, you know, spirituality, holiness, or whether it benefits them in the afterlife or what have you. And if you don't do that, then you're like condemned and damned. I never felt that in my understanding of Judaism. It's like, if you don't do it, you know, you miss out on some stuff, but, you know, there might be a trade-off, you know.
What I don't like about the world nowadays is that people try to mix the colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the people say, just like you mentioned, there is no black and white, there are only 50 shades of gray, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like the concept of finding something good in very, not bad,
Mm-hmm.
but in very evil. For instance, there are people that can find something kind of a good in the Holocaust, in the things that Hitler did, right? Because he had his motives. Maybe he was, just maybe he was not that. No, this man was evil.
Right.
The Third Reich was evil.
Right.
This is evil.
Right.
So I like the distinction between bad and good, the good and the evil. This should be. But once we try to maybe to change the name of something right now, so for instance, this whole concept of naming pedophiles not a pedophile but a minor attractive
Oh,
person.
I haven't even heard that.
Yeah, MAPs, minor
Well, is
attractive
that they're like
person.
offended by pedophile or something?
Yes,
You
because
got to
that's
be
very,
kidding me.
no, I'm telling you.
Yeah, like to me, those people shouldn't have a choice. If they're convicted pedophiles, you're called whatever they want
In
to call
some
you.
states, they even try to do this as pedophiles or as a sexual orientation. Can you imagine this? It's like you're gay, you're lesbian, you're this, that, and then you're a pedophile, which is minor attracted person. That's just a sexual orientation.
Yeah, no,
But
no, no.
you can kind of prosecute, right, for sexual orientation. So you can kind of
Wow,
prosecute the
wow,
pedophile.
that's wild. I mean, that's shocking. I want to look into that, but that is
And in this place, there has to be no gray area, right? This is no gray. This is definitely black. This is evil. That's it. We can't even talk about it. This is
right.
that's bad. This is evil.
Right. So I've brought up Chris Rock a few times, and in my life, I've said, true or not, that Chris Rock and some of the things I've learned from his comedy, his stand-ups, are almost more true. He's been so observant and so articulate that some of the things have almost been more true than some of the things I've experienced in a religious way, right? But one of the things he said kind of recently is about like the example was pilots. You know, like you can't have any that are like just okay. There needs to be an absolute. They all need to be perfect at landing. You know, there isn't just a gray area where it's like, well,
I kind of fly good, but
yeah,
the
exactly.
landing is not my
Right,
thing.
exactly. Or like, like most, like, come fly with us. Most of our pilots are okay.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have that. It needs to be one or the other when it's that sort of thing. And I think that, I agree with you when it's something like a Hitler, something that's terribly bad, child abuse, all I'm really passionate about all the um, unfortunate things that some children have to deal with. But I don't think that there's a gray area to that stuff. It's very, but I mean, like, how much resilience does a kid need to learn? How much survival skill does a kid need to learn to be a productive adult in society? At some point, it's just terrible. It's just absolutely terrible that a kid has to deal with these things. So, so I agree with you regarding that stuff.
So in the U.S. for the last 50 years, there is a huge decline in faith and in religion. So in the meantime, we have criminal, which is going off the roof, right? People don't have values. They don't have like a moral compass. I see that those two things align very much, because if you say that a human being is good on his own, he doesn't need any teachers from the above. He doesn't need any sayings or writings like the Bible, the Quran, Torah, etc. So people say that people are good on just by being people. But what we see, that's not true. We have to live by some kind of rules or restriction or laws which are basic, which almost every human being, every child was taught right from the childhood, right? Don't steal, don't kill, don't murder, don't do this and that. But in the meantime, there are a lot of families which don't have, for instance, a father or mother, or they were raised in foster home and etc. So they didn't have a chance to learn this stuff, and that's where the holy books like Quran, Bible, Torah comes in and says, look, even if you didn't have a father or mother figure, if you even don't know how to live your life, this is the book. You read it and you kind of know how to live your life, which you can't deny the things that are the 10 rules, the testaments, right? Or mentioned in the Bible and in the Quran. You can't neglect them, you can't deny them, you can't say that these are not true. But these are the things that have to be implemented in every human's life.
So I understand what you're saying. I respect your position, though I don't know that these commandments, if you will, should be limited to 10. There's actually a funny movie. I think it was called History of the World. It was a Mel Brooks movie, a Jewish,
very old movie,
right?
yeah.
So there's a scene where Moses is coming down the hill and he has 3 tablets.
15, yeah.
It says, "Oh, I have these 15, and he drops 1 tablet, and there's just 10 left. He just has 2 tablets left. He says, I have these 10 commandments. The thing is that there are interpretations of all these things. As you were saying this to me about there being rules, and they need to be rules that people understand. This concept is this is my high school education coming back, but there's a interplay and argument between I think they call it manifest destiny, or how much choice do we really have as humans. I don't know, it was Thomas Paine or one of these people, these philosophers or whatever, that are writing about do we even have these choices, or is it just God that is
God says we have a free will. He
right?
gave
So
us free
right,
will.
so that's what it is. So free will, but then there are people who think there's the other side of it. But the thing is, for example, let's say one of the commandments is do not steal, right? Well, are there ever any situations where stealing might be okay? I would like to say that there are.
Give me an example.
Let's just go back to the Holocaust, right? So let's say people are living in the ghetto, right? And they don't have food. They're all starving. They're working 12 to 18-hour shifts. Their children are taken away. They're wearing rags.
Yeah, but
this, that, and the other.
They're being abused.
They're being abused. Okay, they're being shot at and made examples of. And the people that aren't working fast enough, they're hanging them in the town center. Things are bad. And then next thing you know, there's a Nazi lunch truck that pulls up, and it's close enough to the fence where somebody could reach their hand and grab a bread.
So you call it stealing?
They didn't pay for it, right?
So one of the major sins in Islam, as far as I know, is being an abuser or being abused. So you have to do almost everything you can to not be abused,
That's an
not to
interesting
be a
concept.
victim.
Right, that's an interesting concept.
So that's the same thing. So in that situation, those poor people, they were doing everything just not to be abused, not to be a victim. So that's not even that's.
So that would be
anti-sin,
different. That
yes.
would. Okay. All right. So let me. Let's say the. I don't know. Let's say somebody needs to steal an apple to feed their children because their children are crying and they're homeless and they don't have any money. I'm just giving you an example. I'm just saying,
I know what you're saying.
There might be situation, and that's just the stealing thing. There are of course 9 other ones that I can't rattle off the top of my head, but I'm just saying that it might not be so black and white. It might be situational, and people at some point also need to question, and not necessarily just because they hear something believe it. They need to think about it, analyze it, question it, and then decide if it's going to fit into their ideology or not.
I know what I mean. So what God says, what the Bible says, is that there is no perfect man on the surface of the planet Earth, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to try to be as good as possible. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, we can't align, for instance, stealing and murdering other human being. Mm-hmm. So these are in my opinion, these are 2 different sins.
Okay. So you're different levels of sin.
These are levels, yeah. And so the biggest sin I believe is just to hurt the innocent ones, which are children. Mm-hmm. Once you do that purposely, on purpose, And as far as I know, once again, in Islam, in Christianity, that there's the same thing, that God knows your intentions. If your intention is to hurt a minor, a child, you're gonna rot in hell, right? But if your intention is to steal an apple or a pie, piece of pie, just to feed a child or feed yourself, so your intention is not to steal because you're greedy, right? Because that's a sin to be greedy. You steal just because to survive. And the God says, Bible says, Quran says, you have to look after your body. You have to live because God gave you this life. You can't kill yourself. You should do everything you possibly can to survive. So
I would think that, I mean, even though I came up with the example, I would think that Judaism and most religions probably have a similar type of provision that if it's, for survival and feeding a hungry baby, you do what you have to do and what have you. So I don't know, maybe my example wasn't great. But, one of the things that is confusing to a non-Christian person is the concept that if, God forbid, for example, I even intentionally wanted to hurt a minor and did, as long as I confess and do a couple rosaries, a couple Hail Marys, and whatever the recipe is, as long as I do that, I'm back to being good, or I'm back to being in God's graces, or something like that. That concept I never quite got. I'm not asking you to explain it per se, but like that's a confusing thing to somebody who kind of like, I carry a lot of my shame and guilt with me all day long, so it's not like I could do one thing or another and like blank slate. Okay, I'm good now.
That's a great example. So in this question, there are two things. So part number one is that's why Protestants appeared, because the Protestants, Martin Luther, didn't like the thing that you can kind of pay for your priest to get a retention, right? Okay. And they were paying a huge money.
Just doing bad things and just cutting a check or whatever, right?
And the other part is what an imam told me is that yes, you can do crime, you can do it, you can repent, but it doesn't mean that God will forgive you. Because God knows your intentions, once again. He knows that you did it intentionally, you stole something, you did harm to an innocent or just to other human being. And He knows your intention. Even if you say, please God, forgive me, I'm so sorry. He knows whether you're sorry or not.
No, that makes sense.
He knows whether you're going to
That's a good explanation. That's a good explanation. Thank you. Because the person who really doesn't care isn't even going to try anyway. They're not going to fake repenting, you know what I mean, just to try to get away with it or something. No, okay, that's an interesting point.
Let's get to Rastafarianism. So that's the religion, I believe, most of the people, maybe correct me whether I'm wrong or not, I'm talking to audience, but I believe a lot of people think of it as just the ones who smoke weed that look very strange, right? With the long hairs. Most of them, I don't know why, but I believe would portray like an African American, someone from Haiti, from that side, from the Caribbean. So you have some info on this religion. I would like you to share.
Sure. So, disclaimer is that I did this research a long time ago. I believe a lot of it still stands, but, the truth is out there if you ask the right questions. So, from my understanding, and how this all started was that I was raised at this certain, level of observance, but having a Jewish identity, and I was very much interested in reggae music. Reggae music like Bob Marley, is the poster child, if you will. Reggae music started in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Okay? And it evolved from other types of music, but it started in Jamaica. And basically the religion of Rastafarianism also started in Jamaica, and they're very much intertwined. The music reflects a lot of the aspects of the religion, and probably even vice versa. They're just very, very much entwined. Bob Marley used a lot of his songs to teach people and to to be that teacher, to be that some even prophet in some sort of way. Some people, they'll listen to Bob Marley and they think that they're going to be on the beach with um, a pina colada and relax, but
More with the joint.
or with a joint. But a lot of the Bob Marley music is it's rebel music. It's the stories, sounds of people who are being oppressed, who want to fight the oppression, and people who want to band together based on similarities. One love. Look for similarities, not differences. Which is, like I said, the concept I drew upon when I walked down the aisle with somebody who was Muslim, right? So, or at least not Jewish. So basically, I always liked reggae music. I always had a respect for Bob Marley. Growing up, I to me, a Rastafarian or somebody who wore their hair like that, they looked cool to me. It wasn't like a different but scary or something like that. There were other kinds of looks that people had. For me, like it was, let's say, like a punk rock look with whether it's piercings or hair and makeup and what have you. That looked a little more offensive and scary to me than somebody who was appearing as a Rastafarian or somebody who at least seemed to be representing themselves in what was more of a natural way. Okay, so I really love seeing live music. So when I was around college age, which in this country is typically 18 to 22 for an undergraduate degree, I was seeing a lot of reggae music, concerts, shows. Bob Marley, of course, has passed away. He has family and a bunch of sons who are very talented. Um, and he was on, and there are other people that are his contemporaries that were popular at the same time, but nothing like Bob Marley. They didn't get out there like he did. But anyhow, so I would go to these shows and I saw people that looked like Rastafarians with, so from what I learned is that, the hairstyle, they're called locks, okay, where the hair locks, right? And there are different styles of it, most common with black people, African people, what people might refer to as African American people, little asterisks there. I'll get into it now. So one of the things I learned is that for some people, they don't want to be called African American. And somebody will, what's even wrong with that? And the idea behind that is that these people are African people from Africa, let's say, okay? Just because 200 some odd years ago, a boat landed here and some basically white dude was like, this is America. Therefore, all the people who are, from different areas, now you're African Americans. All the people who were here before we got here are now Native Americans.
Yeah.
But the problem that a lot of people have is that it's stripping people of their identity. For the thousands of years that the people lived on these lands, there was no America. They're not Native Americans. They're indigenous people to this area. They're the Chumash here. They're the Sioux, the Lakota, the different tribes of people. That's who they are. They're not Native Americans. It's just for the past few hundred years. So there are some people who don't even like the idea of being called African Americans. That's just all I wanted to mention. It's a kind of a consciousness about certain terminology, right? Even nowadays, people read these books like The Four Agreements, which is a great book, by, I think, Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the agreements is be impeccable with your word. So be conscious about your word choices and know what you're trying to communicate, and hopefully it's consistent with what is communicated. So for example, so choosing words is important, and it's also very important in Rastafarianism, as I came to learn. So, anyhow, at these concerts, there were people wearing patches or a shirt that had a lion on it. A lion is a very important symbol in Judaism. The Lion of Judah, the very important symbol, right? But there were also people wearing what I knew to be a Star of David or a Jewish star, right? The interlocking triangles, one's upside down, right? Six-pointed star.
Yes.
Okay? But these people did not look like the Jewish people I went to Hebrew school with, So they looked more like Rastafarians. They were darker skinned and whatever. So I started doing some research and found out that these people do not call this symbol the Star of David. They call it the Shield of Solomon. Okay? And the Rastafarian people...
Another king.
King Solomon,
Yes.
but from the Old Testament.
Yes.
Okay? But the Rastafarian people hold King Solomon in extremely high regard. Okay? So I had to write a term paper in college, and I decided to write it on the combination, or the commonalities between Judaism and Rastafarianism. And this is kind of a little bit about what I found out. All right? So there's a Rastafarian Bible. It's called the Kebra Nagast, and I read it for my report, and it depicts a story of kind of like the lineage of how Rastafarianism came to be. And from my recollection, there was a King Solomon who existed who was incredibly wise, and it was very different for only praying to one God, and all the merchants from all over were passing through, and it was just an abundant society. And the Queen of Sheba, Queen of Ethiopia, heard of this King Solomon and said, I need to find out what this is all about. So they set up all the caravan, and they went to Israel, and they found King Solomon, and she introduces herself. And King Solomon was very gracious and essentially only had one rule. And the one rule was, you can have anything you'd like, but do not take anything without asking. And if you take anything without asking, then I'm going to plant my seed in you. That was the rule. So, as I remember, the dinner that he fed her was, in the book they said, in his infinite wisdom, the food that he fed her was very salty, all these different spices, very salty. And at nighttime, he set up a bed for her in his room, but not a separate bed, but in his room. And on the other side of the room, near his bed, was the pitcher with water. And in the middle of the night, she gets up, she's thirsty from the salty food, drinks the water, bing, bang, boom, plants the seed in her, and she has a son. And I believe the son's name is Menelik. And the story goes on from there, but I believe they leave, and at some point, maybe even then, they leave with the Ark of the Covenant, which is why some people believe the Ark of the Covenant made its way to Ethiopia. They went back to Ethiopia. Okay. So, now, because of this Menelik and all the people that came from that communion, the Rastafarian people can trace their lineage back to King Solomon. Okay? So they revere the symbol, which is the Shield of Solomon. But in addition to that, and I kind of mentioned it earlier regarding my definition of Judaism, but also the definition of an Israelite, and there are many groups that use that term, Israel, an Israelite, Israeli, Israelite. Some groups are specifically black Israelites, and some groups of people believe that the Eastern European Jews, I guess like the term is like appropriated or took the word Israelite from them. And that basically, one of the things I learned, this is going back, but one of the things I learned was that, kind of like in a lot of churches or a lot of artistic depictions of Jesus, he's, maybe blonde hair, blue eyes, super buff. The buff thing, maybe that's is allowed to be buff. But the point that these people were making was that find another blonde haired, blue eyed guy from that area of the world. Even that in itself is not accurate. This guy was a dark skinned man, okay? Very well might have worn his hair in locks because that was the natural thing that happens to long hair if you're not always taking care of it. It binds up and it creates these locks. But additionally, for Rastafarians, and I believe this is related to why Jewish people, the religious, have what they call the payas, the curls,
Yes.
is that somewhere in the Old Testament it says you're not supposed to like draw a blade across either that part of your skull or not even cut your hair. So that's why a lot of rabbis have beards. That's why the long hair became a thing, right? Now, Rastafarian people chose to wear their hair in locks. It was more of like a natural way of wearing it, but from my understanding, it was like the Queen of England or something came to Jamaica and saw all these people and said that they looked dreadful, which is what I remember learning is why some people call them dreadlocks. Okay? People wear dreadlocks. All right. Now, so within Judaism, there are all these definitions that we discussed. Rastafarians, in a lot of ways, believe a lot of the Old Testament, but they also believe New Testament stuff too. So there's even part of it that kind of crosses over to me that is a little confusing regarding how they've kind of picked and chosen the things that maybe they do believe in the Holy Trinity, but they also very much believe in the Old Testament and the tribes of Israel, and there's a concept called the lost tribes of Israel, meaning that most people are aware of 12 tribes of Israel, but they're actually tribes that we didn't really hear about or find out about. They're the lost tribes, okay?
And where did this word Rastafarian come from?
That's a good question. I don't know the etymology of Rastafarian, but I also do know that despite the religious beliefs, there's a gentleman who's named, like, I don't want to butcher it, but Ali Selassie, who is the last ruling emperor and king of Ethiopia, and they had all these very big names for him and titles, His Imperial Majesty, all these other things, and he was alive, I think, like during the 70s or so, and he can trace his lineage back to King Solomon, and that he was highly revered and treated, I think, as a not necessarily like a messiah, but like they treated him almost like a living God. And in Rastafarianism, there's a lot of, from my understanding, this idea and this concept that almost like related to what was happening in the 60s, that like black is beautiful, black is natural, black is beautiful. There's a gentleman, Marcus Garvey, who should be looked up. I mean, he was really big in the whole movement in Jamaica regarding people's rights, and the things that he fought for were to give people more power, more identity, more almost like appreciation and love for who they were. But the music really comes from struggle. Now, something that I think is really interesting relating to this sort of thing, because growing up, I didn't understand how far-reaching Judaism was. There are Jews in China. There are Jews all over every square of the earth they've gone to, and just like anywhere else, they intermix with the local people, this, that, or the other. So you have people that look Chinese, Jewish. You have people who look African, Jewish. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. So the thing is with the So check this out. So there's a tribe from Zimbabwe called the Lemba tribe. Okay, of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? There's one group that were known as the high priests. They're called the Cohens or the Kohanim in plural. Anybody with the last name Cohen is of this tribe, if you will, of the high priests. Okay, and for thousands of years they were the ones. And even in synagogue and during holidays, they have certain rites and rituals that only they can do. Okay, and I believe they can, even within Judaism, they can only marry other Kohanim. Like, even within the same religion, there's, oh, you're not good enough or whatever it is. Okay?
Not that kosher.
Right, exactly. So the thing is that, so there's this tribe, the Lemba tribe, all right? I believe they're like mainly in Zimbabwe or something, and they, I think, population, like 70,000, something like this, right? Anyway, around the turn of the century, when the human genome got mapped out, there were some researchers that discovered that there was a population of black African-looking people, okay, that were not the, when you think of a Jewish person, like Woody Allen or whatever people think of, that doesn't look like them. And basically, when they discovered these people were practicing a very, for lack of better terms, like simplified or rudimentary form of Judaism. And they didn't understand it, right? So they would basically like circumcise. They would, even though Muslim people do, and that area had both. I believe they would like keep the Sabbath. They'd do like animal sacrifices, which was like a Jewish thing. They would, I think, like eat kosher. They would do all these things. And what they found out was that the Old Testament is made up, I think, of like 5 books, and it's referred to as the Pentateuch. Evidently, and if my memory serves me, these people were only had the traditions of the first 3 books. And their oral history is that it's because they left Israel
At the same time where their books were written.
Before the 4th and 5th book stuff happened. So they only had the basic form. Okay? So now, human genome is mapped out, and people are like, I wonder if there's any truth to what they're saying. Cheek swab a few of these people, and it turned out, okay, that these people have the same genetics, specific genetics, as the fucking Kohanim. Okay? So not only did they just have this tradition, but genetically, they had the same genes as the high priests. Pretty wild. Mind-blowing. Why don't we know about it? I don't know. Okay? So, but anyway, this is real. This is like, to me, this is wild. Okay? Now, additionally, in a similar sort of way, Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, this was happening too. I don't know if it's the same tribe, different tribe, or whatever. But what happened was, there were people who were practicing their kind of Judaism, and they were being persecuted. And I think it was maybe in the late 80s, early 90s, Israel. So Israel became a state in like 1948.
Yes.
Okay, right after World War II. And the first law established was called the Law of Return. That law is that if you're Jewish, you can always go home to Israel. No more wandering Jew.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're Jewish, I think they might even fly you there for free. It's called making aliyah. I don't know what that means, but it's basically deciding to move your life to Israel. I believe that they will fly you there on like El Al or whatever, and then once you get there, they'll assist you in housing, like the things that you said that Jewish people do. Well, this is one of the things, right? So housing, job, I don't think they're as big on like the freebies, but also like wanting people to be productive members of society.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and the interesting thing also because I visited Israel a few times, like a lot of people have stereotypes of what Jewish people are, right? But, like the stereotype here is like, oh, doctors, lawyers, and accountants, right? But in Israel, it's a country and it requires everything any other place needs to run. So in Israel, the garbage man's Jewish. Not that that's the lowest, but I mean, like, whatever more service types of jobs people have, Jewish. The policemen and women, Jewish.
Yeah, but because that's the state of Israel. But for instance, in the U.S., if you take the bankers, the doctors, the lawyers, a lot of them, a lot of
100%.
them are
100%.
Jewish, and they have the last name.
Sure, 100%. And statistically, but there's reason why. Do you know what I mean? After being persecuted for so long, there's this value that nobody can take education away from you.
Yes.
Okay? So that's how I was raised. I was raised that no matter what, you need to have an education, no matter what you do with it. Okay? Which is why I went to law school. I didn't really want to be a lawyer. It just made sense to me. You learn how to think. It sounded amazing, right? So, but anyway, so back to the story. So in Ethiopia, there are all these Jewish people that were being persecuted, and like early 90s, let's say, and Israel stepped in because of the law of return, and they sent over a plane, and it was the Guinness Book of World Records for the most number of people on like an Airbus, whatever model, and they flew gazillion people from Ethiopia to Israel as Jews, saying, hey, you're not just refugees and whatever. We're bringing you here because we recognize that you're, Jewish. Okay. Now, the problem that I remember learning about became a political one, which is who decides what the definition of Judaism is. Okay. Now, when a country offers this bundle of benefits, these opportunities,
Everyone is Jewish.
right,
Jewish
right.
Yeah.
So not everyone wants to be Jewish just to get out of their shit situation, right? I'm Jewish. So the like high-ranking rabbis had to come up with their certain definition of what Jewish means. Well, a lot of these people, and not wrongly in my opinion, a lot of these people said, "Fuck you. I'm Jewish. I don't have to prove to you or do it by your definition. I keep kosher, I keep the Sabbath, my son's circumcised, I do the holidays. I don't mind even adding more holidays, but that you guys have, but I'm not going to redirect and redefine what Judaism means to me for all these generations, something like that, So as a result, from my understanding, some of these people do not get the benefits. And because of that also, and because of their appearance, and because of fucking discrimination, okay, which is unfortunate and real, and because of that, some of these people have wound up, I think they're referred to as like the Falasha or Falash Mora. Some of these people have wound up in almost like a ghetto type society where they're on like the outskirts, and yeah, there's higher crime, less education, more bad stuff, and they haven't been fully integrated into society. And from what I understand, there are a lot of people who are able to integrate into Israeli society. I mean, tons of stories of how safe and happy Muslim people feel. Yeah, of course, you also hear the bad stories of how people occupy territory, Palestine. I mean, there's a lot, but there's a lot on the other side too, where it's like, oh yeah, I never feel like persecuted to be Muslim or Christian. I mean, look how many Christian people live and go to Israel. I mean, like, on tours, I was in Nazareth.
That's their holy place.
Yeah, but so Israel's incredible because it's the holy place of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. So, anyway, so these people are now living in Israel, and some of them are having a difficult time. And in Israel, everyone has to join the army at 18. There are certain political kinds of problems. But back also to the Rastafarian stuff, a lot of the people have a special diet, which they call like ital, which is essentially vegan. Okay, and they do use weed or ganja, right, as a holy sacrament and as a way to, I guess, connect and as a way to meditate and be present. A lot of them, I think, try to live a very natural life. But back to what I was saying earlier, there's a lot of, I think, focus on being what they might refer to as being conscious, being aware. And a lot of that also comes down to how you speak, right? And how you conduct yourself and how you represent yourself, how you know, there are people, who in pictures, listen, there are people who take a picture and they're flipping gang signs and their arms are all over the place. But then there are people who are almost very subtly showing a symbol with their hands or their arms or what have you. And there are some, people, Rastafarian people that will very calmly just have their hands like this, maybe on their lap, and this represents the shield of Solomon. They're very conscious about these things, whether it's colors, the words they use. Um, some might not call it a diet, but a live it, because they don't want to say the word die.
Yeah. Ah, gotcha.
Okay. There's a very interesting, other terms and phrases, but ultimately, I found that, the whole religion culture to be very kind of accepting of all things, mellow, go with the flow, which, could be influenced by the ganja, and, it's a cycle of sorts, but essentially there are those similarities, that I learned about and discovered, and there are a lot of songs about Israel, a lot of reggae songs about Israel. The Bob Marley song Exodus is the story of Passover. And in it, he describes the movement of Jah people. Jah is another name for God, okay? In Rastafarianism. So the Song of Exodus is the story of Exodus from the Bible, except Bob Marley is referring to the Rastafarian people, the chosen Rastafarian people, and then Ashkenazi or Sephardic Jews think it's about them, but it's still the same story. People getting out of Egypt, running for their lives,
Well, history is such a fascinating thing. I believe we are so the government. You can say someone is really hiding a lot from us. Maybe there was a lot just lost info, right, which we will never get back to. But the history itself is a fascinating thing. But I don't believe that it is so important for people to know their kind of roots, their how do you say that you're from there, you're from Africa, or you're from Israel, you're King Solomon's grandson. I don't think that once you know that, you kind of you will start living in a different way. You will feel about yourself better, etc. I don't believe in that, but I believe the history should be taught. We should learn a lot from the history, right? Just like what people have in their minds right now, especially the youth in the US, is a lot of youngsters are feeling for Marxism, right? The socialism, the communism, I think that's cool. And what communists always say that, well, the Soviet Union, it was never the true communism. Okay, so the China is not communist. So communism exists. It can be done in the right way, and everyone is going to be happy. But what history tell us is that's not the thing. That's not the way that we should go towards being a happy society.
Right.
Because when they say to us that everyone is equal, and then they become in the same society that are more equal and more equal and more equal, right?
Of course.
Which that's bullshit. So
Right.
I believe we should learn a lot from history and try not to take those. To do those mistakes once again, but I don't believe that we have to trace our heritage and say, oh, I'm now entitled because I'm the grandson of King Solomon or King David. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that even your dad was a great person, a great human being, that you're not a piece of shit,
of course,
and vice versa.
Of course, yeah. So I mean, the I don't know. Forgive me if it seemed like that. But anything that I was mentioning was not necessarily to, like, for example, like, I never once mentioned that I believe that Jews are the chosen people, and that because I can trace my, I came from two Jewish people, that's not my belief. Okay, so I don't have the entitlement. I mean, it's actually difficult to be Jewish. It's not easy. I don't know who thinks it's so great. I mean, like it's hard. There's a lot that comes with it. But the idea that you have to know your past to know where you're going. If you don't know your past, what is it? You're doomed to repeat it. These sorts of things I think are truisms.
Yeah, but in the meantime, in the same time, if someone says, "Hey, Ross, did you know your father was a serial killer? He was a rapist. He was a abuser. He abused children." So right now you have to feel bad for that. You have to feel that you're a piece of shit as well because your dad did those horrible things, and
Right.
vice versa. If he was a hero,
Right.
it doesn't make you a hero.
Sure, of course.
You're a new life on this
Of course.
on this place.
Of course.
Called Earth.
I think about that probably more often than most because at different times in my life I've, let's say, had like a identity crisis where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do as a career. Yeah, I told you, I mean, I'm educated as an attorney, but I didn't necessarily do it because I wanted to be in court arguing somebody else's problem
Yeah.
and getting upset about their stuff.
And somebody wants to do it.
Somebody really loves doing it, but I think about it a lot in terms of like, if I think my father's successful, it's almost like I feel like I at least I was raised to want to, or at least the right thing would be to be at least as successful or more. That's the way I was raised. But then I think about it and I was like, and that's a lot of pressure for me because I feel like my father's successful, or at least financially. In other ways, not so much. But
look at your father. He was that kind of a man. He was a man's man, and you were what? You're nobody.
Right.
You smoke weed, do nothing, right?
Right, exactly. Well, that's what he thinks. So yeah. But the thing is, like, I think about it, like, look at Mick Jagger's children, or all these people that imagine being the son of a Beatle or a daughter of. I mean, like I think I've got challenges. Few children of famous people are more famous than their parents. So people have to live their own lives. People have to make their own mark and do their own things, and hopefully people's legacies both don't clip their wings and keep them low, and they also don't give them false sense of accomplishment just because they came out of some person that made a good living in Beverly Hills.
Just like saying that after the Holocaust all the Germans are bad people, right?
Right. Germans are some of the most, from my understanding, the German people are some of the most defensive about being related to the Nazis.
Yeah.
From my understanding, I mean, if you, from my understanding, it's like if you call a random German a Nazi, they'll kick your ass. Of course, there's some that might high five you, but
there's still a big shame on
the
nationality.
So it's not what some people think,
So to know yourself, I believe that's a very common thing for every human being, especially men. I don't know why, but even especially men, males have this crisis when they're 35, 40, 45. Who am I, right? What am I? What I'm supposed to do on this planet Earth? And the main reason I believe we as parents have to figure out for ourselves who we are, so we could teach our kids. Like, look here, try this, try that, try that. So they could figure out themselves as fast as they can, and they could live the best of their lives.
I like what you said, like as fast as they can to start their life knowing who they are is a gift, right? Because then you know already what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not. I mean, almost like the sooner you can figure that out, the better, because life gets that much more focused for you,
Just imagine, you graduate high school at what? At the age of 18?
18.
So at 18 years old, we tell future students, choose your life path. Like, you want to be a lawyer, a doctor, engineer, architect. I have no freaking. I have no.
Of course.
What I want right now is just to party, to have some friends,
course.
to get into the girls or the boys, and vice versa. That's all I want. I have no idea who am I, what I want to be.
There's a John Lennon song I like called "Working Class Hero," and basically, you know, the concept is that, you know, they put you down and push you around, and then they all of a sudden expect you to pick a career, you know, at 18. And from what I understand, this concept in America where you can be undecided or liberal arts is not in other countries, especially Europe. When you decide to go, from my understanding, when you decide to go to further your education in Europe and university, you've already picked the career path. You don't just pick something and it's like job related. Whereas, you know, somebody can get a liberal arts degree like I did, psychology, and that doesn't translate into any job in America because I actually need an additional graduate degree to be a therapist.
Yes.
I need a master's degree, which is usually 2 years more than the 4 years of university.
So at around the age of 30, you kind of have a profession, right? And you have a huge debt on.
Which is the problem that many doctors have in this country, because doctors, medical doctors, which there are two paths, MD and DO. Doctors typically have 4 years of undergraduate and then 4 years of medical school. And then 1 year they call the general medical, like interim year. And then I think as short as maybe a 3-year residency. So they're literally in their 30s and they're graduating medical school with like hundreds of thousands, $500,000 in debt. You know, there are studies that are done that said that somebody who who at 18 becomes a plumber versus somebody who at 18 goes to medical school, by the time they're, you know, whatever age, the plumber has way more money because they don't have the debt. The plumbing is like one of the highest paid trades. You know, like
you can learn much faster. You don't have to.
You start your business right away.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in your 30s and then pay off $500,000. And also, as a doctor, you're working like a dog. Some of them they're on call in the middle of the night.
Oh my God!
You know, so it's not all it's cracked up to be. At least here.
And the price for an error for a doctor is crucial.
It could destroy your family, right? Take away your kid's college, unless you have it planned out well, but your kid's college fund, you know, your home, it could flatten you.
Yeah.
You know? And human error is a real thing.
Yes.
I'm not saying the people who are negligently doing it because they're not paying attention and like cut off the wrong leg. I'm saying people who like are really trying their best, but it doesn't go well.
Yeah, you know? once I figured out that the surgeons can do a surgery for around 10 hours straight.
Yeah.
Just stand for 10 hours straight.
Yeah. That level of concentration. Yeah.
Physically.
Right.
That's super hard to do. Right. Just to stand 10 hours.
Of course.
What they do, they're concentrated.
Right.
Everything is like under the microscope.
Right.
That's why they paid a lot in the US. They have to be freaking millionaires.
It requires some incredible skills that the average person has not developed.
For sure.
You know, there are a lot of pictures that I've seen about, you know, I think there's one famous one of like the first like successful heart transplant was like a 36-hour surgery or something. And you could see, I think the pictures of the doctor just like sitting, like sleeping, like just like, you know, like 36-hour straight surgery. I mean, there are stories like that. And there are all these new things that are going on that, you know, that they're trying to do to save people. And it requires the doctors to not move. And then even now there's robotic surgery and there's remote robotic surgery.
Yes.
So somebody could be in Dubai and either be the doctor or the patient. And the other person's here and they're working on even laparoscopically with, you know, the computer and the, like virtual reality. I mean, it's phenomenal what they're able to do, but it makes sense why they're compensated more for doing something like that than, you know, the skill set is different. You know,
I always thought of this one thing. So like 20 years ago, there wasn't a thing when people would gather in a stadium to watch other players play computer games, right? Right now, it's a very common thing. They earn a lot of money, so they are kind of a heroes for teenagers, kids, maybe to even some adults. I always thought that maybe humanity would somehow figure out a thing, a way how to make heroes out of, for instance, of surgeons. So we could watch like a highlight reel or 10 minute, a 1 hour thing of a heart transplant or something like that, and we would admire them. They would be famous. They would have a huge following on Instagram because these are the people that have to be heroes. They save the lives, right?
So jokingly, but there's a saying, I think it's from Shakespeare, truth and jest, or though it is jest, there may be truth in it. But in a joke, there's truth, is the saying. But
the same goes with firefighters, for instance.
Well, firefighters, no, they're running into the freaking fire, and police officers, and I mean, there are a lot that we're not. There are a lot of people who are like, wait a second, everyone's focused on this running back of some football team that's making $50 million a year as being somebody's hero when,
And these are absurd monies. Like 50 million, 20 million per season. This is absurd.
Right. So you have these people, and it also happens with football or soccer player, So the thing is that you have these people that people are emulating and idolizing, and like, they're really just playing a game. And then you have people who are literally saving lives, or, I mean, whether it's soldiers keeping the peace or whatever it is, and they're not teachers. Dude, like, teachers in this country get paid so little money. And they're spending more time with our children than we spend forming them, shaping them, teaching them. And it's almost like they purposely keep it low. I almost have this theory that they purposely keep it low to make sure that nobody goes into teaching just for the money. Because there's no way you can do it if it's for the money. Like, you have to have a passion. You have to, right? That has to be it. But the joke I was going to say though was that, like, if you speak to a surgeon, they're already a hero. They have a personality type that they already have they call it a God complex. A lot of surgeons have this. But yeah, I mean, the people that are worthy of our respect and attention are not often getting it. And people who are just flashy and in the spotlight are getting it. And I think it is doing a disservice to our youth and adults who haven't learned yet kind of what it means to make a mark and do the right thing, and you have a lot of kind of like hidden heroes, people who are really giving their all. I mean, nurses, there's so many
oil workers.
So one of the things I've learned in life is that if you think your job is important, you stop doing it for 30 days and then have somebody who's a garbage collector stop doing their job for 30 days.
We're done. Yes.
And you see whose job is important.
Yes.
So
still, this job is not
people don't see it like that though.
Yeah. But if some celebrity doesn't post for 30 days on Instagram.
Right.
Like nothing happened.
Right. World keeps on going.
Yes. So, Ross, the last question on my podcast is always the same. Let's have with you two assumptions, right? So, assumption number one is the most influential and the most powerful human being on planet Earth is the president of the US. The assumption number two is you become one. Once you become the president of the US, the Secret Service comes at you and says, hey, Mr. President, congratulations, we love you, we're with you, we're on your side. We as the Secret Service have all the answers in the world, right? You ask us, we give you the answer, and that's gonna be the truth. You can ask us whatever you want. What would be your first question?
It would be something relating to saving the children. How do we save the children? How do we protect the children? They're the future, so it would be something about taking care of our poorest children in this country to make sure that they have everything they need. I don't care as much about whether there were aliens in Roswell or who shot Kennedy. That stuff to me is less important. The the work that needs to be done, in my opinion, is to look at how the poorest people in this country are treated, work on that, and to, you know, and to save the children, man. I mean, like, it's terrible to me that, you know, there are children that sleep with one eye open. It's very sad. You know, it shouldn't be that way.
That's a great question. You know why? Because if you would ask about the JFK or the aliens, that's about the past, which you can change.
Oh, yeah.
But you asked about the future. How can we do something?
Right, yeah.
I would say just my response is just amen. Just amen.
Cool.
So Ross, it was a blast talking
likewise.
to you for
thank you for your time.
more than two hours.
Yeah.
If the audience would like to find you, where can they do that? On Instagram, Twitter?
Instagram. I have an Instagram. It's called Legal Milestone. Legal Milestone is a good one. That's pretty easy to find me there.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to say that God already blessed you with an amazing mind, amazing brain, amazing abilities to do research, to talk to others, and of course with your two amazing children.
Thank you.
I hope you stay safe, and
Thank you.
whole your family stays
Thank you.
safe as well.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.